Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon, and Will Warren Davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
Welcome again to the Wot Supp podcast, guys. It is, of course, your regular host, Stu Shannon here, and Will Warren Davey is with me as well. Say g'day there, Will.
G'day, guys. Good to be back.
What is unusual about this episode is it's just myself and Will today. We've got quite a few pretty cool guests lined up, right, Will? But just some scheduling issues and stuff like that. We actually haven't been able to tee up a time when everyone's available. We're going to try and get Matty Highgate hosting as much as we can from here out as well. You guys seem to love the content that he puts out. So we're going to get Matty involved a lot more. And actually, Matty's the one who tends to be able to seem to seek out the big names and get them on the show. So absolutely critical for the Wot Supp podcast is Matty. But regardless, we thought that due to the fact that we haven't been able to get much content out there lately, Will, I know you've been busy. I've been flat out as well. And we've had a few people saying, when's the next episode coming out? Will and I thought we would jump on and have a little bit of a chat about what is going on in the industry right now and I guess the big news.
Yeah, beautiful, mate. And I think that's why this particular platform is so valuable is that it's probably one of the only sort of state of the nations for the Aussie sup industry. You know, there's really nothing else that does that, and we've had a heap of movement lately. Hey, it's been exciting. It is honestly since we since lockdowns were lifted and gyms have gone back in mid-July, it has just been like supplement Christmas. It has been insane for the fitness industry. It's growth on growth on growth. Stores are exploding. You know, brands are bringing out new products. It's honestly like, and typically, as you know, being in the game a long time, mate, this time of year is typically the dead season. Like winter is typically the just absolute, plummets.
It is. I think the funny thing is that winter is supposed to be the pits.
It is. It's meant to suck.
Like historically, in the supplement game, you make your money during summer when everybody's training, and then you squirrel away as much as you can for the winter. And because nobody's in the gyms in the winter, right? But this winter, we were kind of forced out of the gyms, and that wasn't okay. So big bad COVID came and everyone went, oh no, I can't train. Forgetting that every other year for the past 10 years, I haven't trained during the winter anyway. Yeah. The bands get lift, everyone gets excited, rushes back into the gyms, and all of a sudden, it's supplement heaven. We got to a point where it was almost like a repeat of the toilet paper situation with protein powders. People just, as soon as they announced the gyms being reopened, it was just swarms. People came running. So I'm sure you've seen the same sort of thing with your outgoing orders, Will.
I mean, I've seen an interesting spike too in the adrenal stuff, which is fun, I suppose, because I think another thing that I've sort of seen across a few colleagues, because you and I have a similar circle. A lot of business owners tend to have the same personality type, where they've all come out of the gates red hot. We've all a lot of us had to work through COVID to keep our businesses running, but for a lot of people, I think it was still probably a reduce from our maximum usual workload, and so people had a bit of time to sort of catch up, catch their breath, get back into it. And as soon as they lifted bans and gyms opened, I don't think anyone's really caught their breath yet. And that's what I put it down to, being a lot of adrenal stuff's moving lately, at least in my part of the world, because I think people are just really feeling the hit of feeling a bit overwhelmed. I know that I've gotten a few points in the last few weeks where I've actually felt a bit overwhelmed. I've just gone, wow, this is just too much to take on. Like it's gone from 0 to 110 in literally like a 2-week turnaround from when gyms open. So yeah, it's been interesting, but yeah, not just proteins for us, but yeah, particularly the adrenal stuff's been massive. I think it's just people are, just sort of really getting into it, trying to really hit the ground running and it seems to be on top of it.
I think you're really right with what you're saying there. I think that kind of lull period that we all saw, regardless of whether you'd like to admit it or not, there was a definite tough period there. But I think that you're right. It did give us a chance to really come up with our best game plan. And everyone came out of, I guess, lockdown and hit the market hard with whatever it was they had come up with. And everyone had come up with something different. So everyone was really trying to tackle the industry with, I guess, a new thought process and a new strategy and a new style that maybe they had never done before. And when you've got everyone doing that in an industry, all of a sudden it's a really exciting place. And all of a sudden the consumers are right behind it as well.
It's awesome, isn't it? There's this like contagious energy in it at the moment. And it's when you said it, there's been a lot of creativity in ISO. I think that's dead on. I think a lot of people who are normally too stressed, too under the pump, working just balls to the wall to actually sit down and make up something a bit outside the square, had that time to sit down and think outside the square. And I think we saw some really cool things come out of that. I don't think we've even scratched the iceberg. I think products that were planned in June, March, April, June, that sort of period, we'll probably see in another month or two being dropped when the creative genius actually had its time to thrive. Like I picked up my, I'm a classical guitarist from a few years back, and I picked up my guitar for the first time in years because I just had the time. I was writing down formulations, I was thinking of new product concepts, and I think none of us really had time to scratch ourselves before this.
Well, even just with my brand, like I had a product planned to drop right when they announced the ban, right when they announced that everything's closing down, gyms are closing, stay at home. I had a product ready to drop that week. We had done all the promo work. We had gotten everything ready, and we were about to hit the go button for our ads and the whole thing. And we had to hit pause on that. And we ended up dropping it anyway, about 2 weeks later, like a soft drop, which kind of fizzled out because it was right in the middle of COVID when we ended up going with the drop. But we've come out of that stronger than ever. Now that particular product is booming. It's doing well. It's being picked up. And I think a lot of people have probably seen that. We feared the worst, and I think we kind of got beyond that. And now we're seeing something that's far better than what we expected out of this. But something interesting that has happened recently that I did want to talk about outside of, new products dropping and all that sort of thing is one of the big Aussie brands, or one of the big brands in Australia right now, has been pulled from the shelves. Horror, been pulled from the shelves. One of the big pre-workouts. I will name it just so that everyone knows what we're talking about. And it is not gone for good, and it is not, I guess, the terrifying situation that everyone thinks when they hear about a product being banned. But the product is Disorder, which is a pre-workout by Faction Labs. Huge product at the moment. There's rarely a supplement store you find that doesn't have this. And I mean, the rumor mill has been running wild with why this has been pulled by the TGA, right, Will?
This happens as we saw. This is what started this podcast, I suppose. The TGA tends to have they'll tend to intervene periodically at times to regulate a space that, in fairness, needs regulation. And I guess that's how this podcast was born way back at the end of last year, wasn't it? With the TGA putting a very, very close, sort of a bit of a magnifying glass on the industry, and it appears that it's happened again recently. And they picked some of the bigger players in the game. Very popular pre-workout. That product, the guys behind that are legends, and I hope they get that bad boy back, sort of tweaked and returned. But I know that you've got got a bit of it's an inside scoop, Stu, to share with our listeners.
That's right. I kind of, I wanted to put an end to a lot of the rumors that I'm hearing because, those sort of things can be damaging to a brand, and some of them have just been plucked out of nowhere. I'm not going to repeat any of the, any of the dumb rumors or conspiracy theories and stuff that I've heard out of this. But I think right now in the world is a time when people just love to put fake information out there. It seems to be the thing to do. It's like, I heard what happened with that Disorder. But I just want to set the record straight for the people, whether it's for business owners, whether it's for consumers, whatever it is. So the issues with the products that were flagged by the TGA were primarily labeling issues to do with the way that the serving size is displayed on the container and the way that the dosages reflect that. So basically, this product is what we call a 20-40 serve. Generally speaking, with a 20-40 serve, your single serve is 1 scoop. and that's your 40 serves, and your double scoop is 20 serves. This product was a little bit different in that 1/2 of one scoop was a single serve. Okay, so it was listed, one single serve is 1/2 of one scoop, and a double serve is one full scoop, which potentially could be confusing to the consumer. But the other issue was that then when we looked at the breakdown or the composition information, everything was listed in dosages for one scoop, not one serve. So all of the dosages listed actually represented 2 serves, not one, which was the main issue. That's the main thing that has to change. So the main thing that needs to change is the way that it's written. Basically, the product won't change hugely. The size of the scoop will change. So the scoop will be half the size of the current scoop, so that we get one scoop being one serve. Okay. And 2 scoops being 2 serves.
And look, that's probably in its, for people particularly, because last thing you want is a new consumer coming to the game and having a crack at a double scoop, putting down 900 megs of caffeine. That'd be a pretty rough start to the game. And I've had it happen in products like, thank God they were non-caffeinated in earlier launches where I did a similar thing. I had 1/2/1 instead of 1/2. And it is because it's so popular now to do the one scoop or 2 scoop option. It is just assumed when you pick up a 2040, it's, it is a double scoop instead of a half versus one. So I can definitely see where that sort of, and I guess that's probably a good example of the TJ actually being a bit of a watching eye. Like that I guess is probably, considered to be, them acting responsibly, I guess, isn't it? In a sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing that we've always said, even since the first episode of this, is we're not against the TGA. We want to work with the TGA. We like the fact that we have a regulated industry that's safe. That's what we like. We don't want to cross the line into a nanny state where, we cross this line of safety and we go into this line of where we're removing things for no good reason because, X, Y, Z. So the other thing, though, that I did want to mention is there was a flagged ingredient that I found surprising because it's widely used throughout the industry. It's used in many, many commercial products that you can pick up in any retailer, and it's from what we can gather from the data, from all the research and anything that I've read, is that it's quite safe or very safe, which is Mucuna pruriens, which is also known as velvet bean extract. And that's used in a lot of pre-workouts. It's used in a lot of products, actually. You can buy it as a pure extract straight from Chemist Warehouse or from your local Woolworths. That ingredient was flagged and has been asked to be removed as well. So the main issue was the labeling issue and the panel needing to change with dosages and the way that it's written. The product, in essence, won't change much, but Mucuna pruriens needs to be removed, which is, I found, unusual. What's your take on that, Will?
Yeah, it's in that interesting space, isn't it? Because they went the same way with 5-HTP and I guess serotonin precursors or agonists before, and it's weird when you get to anything that. So I guess for those of you who aren't familiar with Mucuna pruriens, it's standardized for L-DOPA, so it's a dopamine precursor. But I guess they do get a little bit funny about that sometimes. We do see, for example, with 5-HTP, so 5-hydroxytryptophan, that's a precursor for serotonin. And with the widespread use of antidepressants now, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, and serotonin toxicity being an issue, like buildup of serotonin being an issue, they've very heavily regulated the serotonin agonist space, but typically they never really bothered with things that play with dopamine, largely because it's not really anything that interacts with many pharmaceuticals or anything. So it is unusual that they targeted Mucuna. Like that's a very, it's botanically based, and that's usually a pretty fine thing. And it's it's a really well known.
Well, I was very surprised because it's never popped up on in conversation before. Like, I mean, I deal with different manufacturers on a daily basis, different companies, every single day. And it has never once popped up in a conversation that Mucuna pruriens might even be in the firing line or might be a targeted ingredient, which, I would have never understood any reason why it might be targeted. So anyways, that's the story. It is nothing else outside of that. The product will primarily remain the same. Now, I'd like to make the point as well that of all the ingredients that you could potentially remove from that product, I think Purians is probably one that's going to have the least impact on it. So I don't think you're going to be seeing a particularly different product hit the market, really. I think you'll see the scoop size change, and the way that it's written will change is the main thing you'll see different in the, I guess, version 2.0, which I don't even think the name will need to change, because essentially the product will remain the same.
Look, it's and it's you're right of all the ingredients, but it's interesting, and it is a good thing though. We have got pretty much world best practice in the Australian supplement industry for being probably the most regulated in any space, in any market overseas. And most things, particularly when you manufacture a product in Australia, it generally means that you are, above and beyond the expectations of any other market that you might try and sell in. Canada is on par, possibly a little bit even more scrupulous, but apart from that, we're pretty well gold standard for what is expected globally for people. People supplement industry. So.
I'm interested to get your take on like, obviously we're chatting a little bit about pre-workouts right now anyway, so we may as well delve right into it. There was a thread that came up on one of the Australian muscle building forums the other day, and I was kind of one of the more prominent voices in the thread that kind of came after the question. And someone was basically asking, since your DMAA and whatnot has been banned, what are the good pre-workouts out there at the moment? And with some of the responses, I kind of realized that most people have absolutely no clue what to even look for in a pre-workout. And I mean, the responses varied from, basically you're looking for as much caffeine as you can get. Some people were confused and were naming compounds you should look for that, aren't even stimulants. There are testosterone boosters, and there was all sorts of things, different things that people were saying. So what's your take on, I mean, as someone who formulates, let's kind of rewind a little bit. How do you go about formulating a pre-workout?
The stimulants are an afterthought, I suppose, because I guess what people want out of a pre-workout is the ability to train harder. That's what I think. And usually they want to be in the zone whilst they're there, and they want to perform harder whilst they're there. So I definitely see a space for, caffeine is the most studied ergonomic aid, with between 2 and 4 milligrams per kilo. It is known to be the bomb for performance. But when I look at it, I try and think, well, why are we using this supplement? And it's to enhance performance in any particular athletic setting. And you go, all right, well, what does that? What makes your body work better? I tend to look at energy systems. I tend to look at, buffering lactic acid. I tend to look at power output. So I guess that a lot of people have gone down that trend of looking for caffeine as the main marker. They're going, how many milligrams can I squeeze into this serve? And that's their judge of what a good pre is. I
think it's strange. Like, for me personally, as a consumer of supplements as well, I think it's important to remember that I don't just manufacture or I don't just have products manufactured and just sell products. I also use supplements, and I use other products that aren't my own brand as well. Like I use a lot of supplements. I'm a supplement guy. I've loved supplements forever. So I use a lot of subs. I'm not afraid to admit that. I love supplements. That's my life. So I use a lot of different brands that are out there. But when I'm looking at a new product, a new stimulant-based pre-workout, and I grab one and I see that one has, say, 320 milligrams of caffeine per serve, and another one has 400 milligrams of caffeine per serve, I'll go, oh, wow, they've either accidentally or inadvertently way overdosed the caffeine. So therefore I'm not going to get as good an experience on this one. I'll put that one down. And I've always used that as my measure. It's like, oh, they've accidentally overdone it on the caffeine. Definitely. Let's go with this one that's got 320. Cause I really feel like caffeine is one that gets far, far worse when you put too much of it in. But yet I'd see someone in my store go, well, this one's got 400 milligrams of caffeine. This one's got 320. I'll go with the 400. I'm like, what is your reasoning there? Are you trying to ruin your experience? Like, what's your goal? And I think it's really, really hard to explain that to the consumer, is that more, especially with stimulants, is not better. It is to a point. So there's the point at which more is better. And beyond that point, it's not better. In fact, it's far worse.
God, it's bad. When we've all been absolutely, you get to the point where you're scattered. You're feeling horrific. You're feeling anxious and stressed and clammy and sweaty, and it's just not a good time. And the half-life of caffeine is like 4 to 5 hours in natural, particularly in some natural forms. And so, you've still got hours ahead of you of a crappy time when you're looking at upwards of anything north of 300. For me, anything north of 200 is a bad time. But I think
what I think's happened is I think that people are chasing the feeling that they had on DMAA. Okay, they're chasing the feeling that they used to get on DMAA. That's what they're after, and the consumer doesn't know that the best way to do that is not to just chase heavier stimulants, because DMAA, it's a heavy stimulant, but it didn't need to be dosed high. You're looking at like 30 to 60 milligrams of DMAA to get that perfect feel from it. Bumping caffeine higher and higher and higher does not get you closer to this feeling that you used to get off DMAA. Now, for me, when I'm formulating, I like to look at caffeine as a base. I like to look at that as something that I can use to trigger the central nervous system. We want to get that heightened sensation. We want to give you something that speeds things up a little bit, right? And so we can use caffeine for that. For me personally, I don't like to go beyond 300 milligrams if I can help it. And then I'm looking at what can I use to support the caffeine in order to give some sort of effect that's reminiscent of those, of those former compounds that we used to love. And that's when I start to look at things like how can we look at increasing production of dopamine, serotonin, all this sort of,
Yep.
Exactly right. What can I do to improve the effects of the caffeine? Not I think everyone's looking for a standalone compound. Everyone's saying, what's going to be the new DMAA? What's going to be the new DMAA? And I think the answer is nothing. We're not going to get a standalone compound that can do what DMAA did. However, we can trigger everything in the body that DMAA did. We already have the tools to be able to do that. So what it comes down to is who's formulating it and how much thought have they put into it, and how much do they understand what's happening in the biochemistry? How much do they understand what's happening when we take these things? And that's where I think truly great formulation happens. And I actually said this in the thread. I truly believe that there are probably, I said 5 or 6, I think there's probably closer to maybe 10 or 12 really good formulators in Australia. And I think they are responsible for, the top percentage of products that exist on the market, the top sellers. And the other 90%, what exists out there is formulated by people who really, really shouldn't be formulating.
Because and they formulate to what their market trend is and not what's actually good, I find. There's a massive, you'll see things that go, and it's a self-perpetuating marketplace in that way, in that you'll see there'll be 300 CAF, then there'll be 350 CAF. And so all the market leaders go, oh, there's a lot of sales happening right now. There's a lot of buzz around this product at 350 CAF. Let's try and match that. They bring out something at 375 or 400. Then everyone goes, oh, well, a lot of hype around the 400. Let's go 450. And it creates this, it's like with BCAAs, how it used to be, 2 to 1's the studied ratio, 2 to 1 to 1's the studied known best form ratio of leucine to isoleucine to valine. Then everyone goes, oh, if 2 to 1 to 1's good, 10 to 1 must be the best. It was like 4 to 1, 8 to 1, and then Max's came out with a 10 to 1 to 1, and you're like, you got, what's next? 1,000,000 to 1? It was, but it wasn't better than 2 to 1. It's the same here. It's baffling me that there's only so much adrenaline you can release from your adrenal. There's only so much adrenal gland stimulation you can get. But I think you made a really cracker point in that you came across what I came across just recently. They're not I don't think anyone in particular, you're right, they're not chasing a number on a label, because apart from the caffeine, the rest of it I think is essentially might as well be written in Hebrew, in terms of people's understandings. But what they are after is that euphoric, in the zone, focus, tunnel vision, great energy, mood, just real. It's again, that's all nootropics for me. I think that's what's so important. And I guess my pre-workout got sold out before. We're meant to come back sooner, but I've since, I've got nootropics in a non-stim pre, no caffeine at all. And that's became my main mover. And I've just kept that as my main line. And I'm probably the only sup company whose pre-workout has no caffeine. That's my main pre right now, as a non-caffeinated pre. And I'm really cool with that, because I like the idea of lower cortisol, more nutrient partitioning, better pumps, better performance. and people are still feeling good because the nootropics are there. Like nootropics are where it's at, in my opinion. Like people want that focus, the mood, the elevated training experience. That doesn't come from a bucket of synthetic caffeine. That's just, at the very least, that's a bit of dopamine floating around, but and a little bit of adrenaline. But yeah, it's just it.
That's right. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that there's definitely there's a place for caffeine in the market. There's a place for uncaffeinated products as well, like Grind, which is your product that you were just talking about. That's what I'm using right now. That's one of my favorite pre-workouts that exists, and it's got no caffeine in it. But, I think that there's something to be said for still triggering that central nervous system. So using the synthetic CNS stimulant, whatever it might be, there's definitely a place for that. We're talking about, your caffeine and your synephrines and, all these sort of things. But that nootropic space, hugely unexplored at the moment. We're talking about like a territory, this is the equivalent of Alaska. It's the final frontier. This is like, we have space here to really work, and we have space here to really have some fun. The amount of different botanical compounds that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of yet, that exist out there that we're not even talking about yet, not to mention the amino acid compounds that exist out there. That nootropic space is the direction that things are going to be heading. Yes, I think we will always have your stimulants there as that kind of ignition switch, right? Let's make sure that we are triggering some adrenaline production. Let's make sure that we are speeding things up a little bit, and that we're getting that kind of, I guess, that heightened sense. But then when we're talking about triggering that brain chemistry or those releases of endorphins, we're really getting into that nootropic space then. And that's really where the answer lies. Can we make something that gives you the same feeling as DMAA? In my opinion, we can get pretty close. And I guess, I feel as though we have actually done better already. I feel as though we already have combinations that, for me personally, feel far better than DMAA ever did. And I think we have this also tendency to remember DMAA with rose-colored glasses on. The way that it's spoken about now is like it's the stuff of myth and legend. But I mean, at the time when we were using it, yeah, we used it and it gave us, charged us up, and we had these fantastic workouts. But, it wasn't something that we went, oh man, if they ever took this stuff away, I'd be devastated and I'd never be able to train again. And, that's kind of the way that we almost remember it. I think we want to remember it as being better than it was.
Yeah, and I think that there is always that nostalgia. And I think it's almost of the era as well, because it coincided with a lot of the people in our circle now. That was the time we were starting to get into SUPs in a big way. That was when we were starting to get really, that was a really good era for people who are, so I don't know, there's a bit of nostalgia tied to it as well. I think that it tends to lighten the experience, because I'm with you. I think, you can, with all the fun things we can use, if you can look at acetylcholine, theobromine, you can really have a bit of a play around, get some really awesome mood modulators, and you can have a fantastic workout. But I do agree. I have trialed some non-stimulant nootropic products that have been fantastic, and with the addition of some caffeine, they do go next level. Caffeine is a nootropic in itself, but it's just, but I do think what the interesting parts with pre's I find is that they tend to be, they're the funnest part of the sup industry for sure. But they also happen to spike the most innovation, I think. And when you started mentioning TGA back at the start, it got my head tinkering. And when you said DMAA bans and the DMHA ban, the DMHA ban was really fantastic in that it sparked a huge amount of innovation behind the scenes in the sup industry as people grappled to try and find something similar. And that invented tear cream, and then tear cream was sort of a bit of a non-event for some, for a lot of people. It didn't quite spike fast enough, but it lasted a long time. So for endurance athletes, it'd probably be ideal. It doesn't spike your heart rate or blood pressure much, and it lasts like 4 hours. Just not much up front. And I made a pre with that used to be like, 320 calf and like 200 dynamine. It was great. You could train for like 4 hours, but there was no real immediate like boom, and so then we got dynamine, and I love dynamine to bits. I think that's a wonderful stimulant. It's a fast kicking, punchy, dopaminergic, awesome stimulant. So, it's the father of innovation. I think we get complacent when we have things like DMHA and DMAA now to use, because we don't have to get too complex. You could have made any old bread and butter formula back then. Just throw some citrulline, 300 CAF, 45 megs DMAA, boom, put it out in the marketplace, you're happy days. But now we've got to be way more creative. We've got
I think the thing, I think there's a message to be had as well, though. Because you and I, like, obviously we're formulators. So what's the first thing we do when we grab a product? We turn it around, we have a look at the panel. We want to see what's in it. We want to start trying to, I guess, unravel the thought process in the formulator's head. So we try and deconstruct what they were thinking about when they made this formula. Well, this is what I do anyway. I'll grab a product, I'll flip it over, and I'll say, okay, so here's where he started. Here's what he's used to do this. Here's what he's used to do that. But he's realized that, there's going to be some conflict here. So he's put this in to try and, increase absorption or whatever it is. And I try and break down the process of the formulator. Some tubs I turn around and I go, okay, this was made by someone who has absolutely no idea what any of this stuff does. Yeah. And that happens more often than I'd like.
And you know what? That's the first thought I have when I see a pre with a huge amount of caffeine on the back. You look at it and you just go, lazy. That's what I think straight away. First thought in my head, you're lazy. That's what I think. Whoever put this on paper was lazy. It was just literally going, it's no creativity. It just takes out all of the elegance and all of the potential, and it just goes, let's just slap someone in the face with some anhydrous. It's like, there's so much better things. I get disappointed when I see that because they're relying on that.
I think it's partially laziness, but I think it's also like just a lack of knowledge or lack of research. I guess that comes down as part of laziness as well. But I think some people just don't know. Some people just don't know that there's really more to it than just throwing a bunch of ingredients together. And I always compare it to baking a cake. If you've got a really, really delicious chocolate mud cake recipe, you're not going to be able to discover how to make that cake by just me giving you a bunch of the raw ingredients and not telling you what amounts to put each one of in. You're never going to end up with that cake at the end. It is not going to happen. There's a lot more thought that needs to go into making these things than just, let's throw these together at the highest dosages we can. It doesn't work that way. Just the same as if you threw all those ingredients in to make the cake, you're going to end up with some horrible mess, not a delicious chocolate mud cake at the end. And I think, like a lot of people after listening to this podcast and who talk to me and stuff like that will say, well, Stu, you keep on kind of saying to us, well, we're never going to be able to figure out what's good by reading this stuff unless we've got, a PhD or something. That's not what I'm trying to say either. I think what I'm trying to say is find a middle ground, get some understanding of some of these compounds and what the basics are, what they're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, the number one factor for me, the number one takeaway that I want everyone to have is just buy the thing and try it. Or better yet, grab a sample from your local supp shop, wherever you shop. I don't care where it is. They've usually got a sample tub of that product behind the counter, or the company's provided them with some sample sachets. Give it a go and see what effect it has. Does it really matter to you if this product doesn't have as much caffeine as that one, if you feel 10 times better on this one? At the end of the day, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to achieve something that improves your performance, that you feel fantastic on, that you love. So try it. Try the thing. Just see how it feels.
That is a good take home, because I've had some underwhelming, and you've mentioned this a few times, I've had some very underwhelming panels that have really impressed me. And what did that was probably the first big brand, I think, or one of the first. It's obviously been around for a long time, but one of the big players that came out from the US that I think did an entropic Rise pre was pretty cool. And again, we're not a commercial body this thing, but just as an interest, their pre was only like 200 maybe 275 calf. At the time the highest stim was like 320, so it's still it was about 50 megs less than I think it was mid to late 200 meg caffeines. But it had CDB choline, had tyrosine, it had a fair few nootropics and like well thought out and synergistically thought out nootropics. And I remember taking that and going, this is a really basic formula, but this is super impressive how I feel on this. This is a really fun training experience. And on paper, you pick it up and anyone just go, oh yeah, whatever. It's not interesting. It's not sexy. It's not, it hasn't got any one standout feature, but it's just really well put together. And the nootropics are what lifted that from what would have otherwise been a complete, like really underwhelming pre to like just an up here. And I recall that to now, how that felt. And I just always thought, like you said, at some point you've got to try it, right? Like at some point you got to pick up a scoop and just have a go. And I'm probably getting a bit, crusty in my old age in that way. I need to start doing that again.
Sometimes it's a bit scary to try them again, isn't it? Like
it
you remember that bad experience that you had on one of these, 400 meg caffeine ones, a couple of years back, and you're like, oh, no, I don't know if I want to try it. But
I'm getting anxious just thinking about it, mate.
You have to try. I'll tell you what, though, another one that comes to mind, it's the same sort of scenario as you just mentioned. I don't know if you've had a chance to try this one yet, but it's a new one. There's a new Australian company called Impact, and they do a pre-workout called Rocket Launcher.
Oh, I saw that on your page the other day. What's that about?
Yeah. Well, it's got just 8 ingredients, just 8. And they're basically all your standard stuff, instead of anhydrous, though, they've gone for green tea extract, so your natural caffeine, but you've got a full dose of citrulline malate. You've got betaine in there. It's like you said, it's a simple blend, but when you take it, it does exactly what you want it to do. You get in the gym, you feel fantastic. It's not over the top. It's not over stimmy, but you feel charged up. You want to rip the place apart. I love it. I love it in its simplicity, but its effectiveness. If you read the panel, you're not going to jump out of your socks. But when you try it, it's really, really good. And there's just so many out there like that I could name. And they're the ones that I wish the consumer would look at and go, oh, I'll give this a go. But they just don't. They want to see,
something flashy or I think that was where, and Sigmund mentioned that on his episode, I suppose. You asked him the question, you're probably one of the few brands who have never used a trademark product or never used a
patented product,
patented products, and any of these special compounds, the Vaso 6s out there, the S7s, the Alpha Size, GP, all these things that are big touch points for a lot of people, knowing who and a lot of customers seek them out. And we ask, what's the go? And it's like, well, the products have worked, the qualities the formulas are quality, and the brand has grown regardless. Why would I add them? And I guess it comes down again, if it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I suppose. But a really, really cool thing you said there. So the green tea, as the main caffeine source, and why that feels really nice. I was listening to a really cool podcast on caffeine metabolism recently. It turns out the reason is synthetic caffeine versus your natural caffeines, like your green teas, green coffee beans. They tend to break down into, so you've got everyone's seen on a panel, it might say instead of caffeine and anhydrous in synthetic caffeine, in brackets it'll say 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. It's a xanthine group that's methylated. Natural sources of caffeine break down, so it'll metabolize first pass. You'll get your xanthine group, which will go off and be an adenosine uptake inhibitor, all that jazz. But the cool thing, natural ones also have an additional feature where they metabolize down to theobromine, which has a wonderful implication for mood. And a lot of them have also got naturally occurring L-theanine, another cofactor, really beautiful thing for calming it all out and smoothing out those big peaks and crashes. And it's really cool when a lot of natural ingredients are used. They have all the cofactors that you want to have a nice experience there. You got the theanine to smooth it out. You got the theobromine for the mood. It was just really cool. I always loved natural caffeines, and I use them in a few products, and I use them for things like chlorogenic acid or whatever. But it was just really cool to I sort of revisited that after a few years of not picking up a book on that. And it was really interesting. That's sort of that's the mechanism of high. If anyone's worried why everyone's ever wondered why when they pick up a product and they have natural source of caffeine, they feel good. Yeah, that's just a bit of background.
Yeah. Well, something else that's really interesting about caffeine that I really kind of went down a rabbit hole with a few years ago, looking into synthetic caffeine, your anhydrous, is where it's sourced and how it's extracted. And that's something that's very interesting, and it plays some impact into, I guess, the caffeine hangover and the crash factor of the caffeine. So when we're purchasing caffeine, a lot of the distributors source their own now, which is fantastic. We don't have to worry about that. But if you are looking at the source of caffeine, you'll see things like, caffeine anhydrous, 97% pure, which is, most people go, well, that's fine. That's fantastic. That's nice and high. That's pure enough for me. But what I wanted to know was, what's the other 3%? There's something else in there that is not caffeine anhydrous, that is having some sort of an effect in my body. And the more research I did and looked into how the anhydrous is extracted from usually coffee beans, I was kind of really blown away. But a lot of the times, they're using compounds to strip the botanicals is the initial phase. So they'll use all sorts of different solvents and stuff like that. So what happens is, these botanical extracts are crushed down into like almost like a paste. And then they're washed with solvents. It could be acetone. It could be, a number of different things that they're washed with. And then what we do is we try and extract out just the pure caffeine from that wash that's left behind. Well, a lot of the times they'll dehydrate it, or there's a bunch of different processes that happen, but sometimes there's little bits left over of these solvents, and these solvents do things like give you really bad headaches, make you feel crook in the stomach, and they're acceptable at very, very minute quantities in these products. And for me, it was a big aha moment, because I realized that there's a big difference between a 96% purity anhydrous and a 99.99% purity anhydrous as to how much nasties are left over in it that I don't want in there. And you're never going to find out what they are unless you track right back to how this anhydrous was actually extracted and how it was synthesized. But sourcing is important too, and looking at where your caffeine is coming from, looking at where your contract manufacturer sources from, how much do they know about this product. And I think that's one of the things I like about natural caffeine, is that there's been very little done to it. We don't end up with things in there that shouldn't be in there.
But one of the interesting ways that I guess talk of a bit of a trend was using highly standardized naturals. Though, how I found that is normally it might be 1.5 to 5% in its natural state caffeine, if it's like a guarana or a green tea leaf or a black tea, or whatever it might be, as just an actual bean or leaf or whatever. And you'll still get some that'll be green coffee bean brackets 98% anhydrous. And it often, what I realized too in sourcing was that a lot of the time they'll get a batch with you have some synthesized from green coffee bean, for example, spiked with synthetic to bring up the standardization amount. So you're right, it is important to look at the sourcing of your ores. That's really interesting though. I didn't know how it was actually done. Apparently it's a pretty wicked thing to look at under a microscope. Apparently it's got these really cool crystalline structures that are like really, really hectic, like a kaleidoscope to look at through a microscope.
Well, I haven't actually experienced that either, but I think that when you start thinking like that, it really opens up, I guess, like I said, you open up a can of worms, and then you become obsessed about it. So my advice is, don't start looking down that avenue. Just be comfortable that your contract manufacturer has already done that.
Yeah,
and I think that we're in a lucky country here, because the contract manufacturers in Australia, as far as what I've seen anyway, are sourcing incredibly high grade raws. They're looking at things that are heavily batch tested and third party tested, and they're making sure that there's systems in place to ensure that what they're getting is high quality ingredients from produce that's high quality, and we're getting something at the end of the line that we're expecting to get. And I think with Australian manufacturers, generally speaking, you're pretty well insured of that. I can't speak for products coming out of other countries that aren't as regulated, but I think you're usually a pretty safe bet when you're looking at Australian stuff.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate here. We're in a pretty good place now. Manufacturing here has really come a long way, particularly in the last 2 years. I find Australia's manufacturing has just gone leaps and bounds, and it's in response to the market, thankfully, starting to really like to support local, which is awesome, and that's what's really, really been exciting. Actually, is seeing so much of the Aussie space. It's exploded. It's awesome now. If you look at most of the market leaders right now, it's all Aussie brands here, which is unreal. And that's made manufacturers have to up their game, because before there wasn't much demand. Now there's most of the shelves of most Supp stores here are Aussie made brands, and they're manufactured here, and it's really quite cool to see that trend lately. I'm loving that movement.
100%. And I think as a store owner as well, we're more inclined to pick up Aussie brands now. Like once upon a time, if I had an Aussie brand and I sat it beside a US brand, I would always assume that the US brand was going to outperform it. But now there's been a shift where I assume that the Aussie brand is going to be dosed correctly. I assume that they're going to be using high-grade ingredients, and it's really nice to be able to be in a space where the Aussie brands are the trusted ones, and they're the ones that now the consumer is going to and going, is it Australian? Oh, good. It's going to work. It's going to be a solid product. And I think that is really, really awesome. And it's, I think it's really at the point where, we need to tip our hat to those contract manufacturers in Australia now, because they are doing a really good job and they are coming out with some phenomenal products.
It is cool, isn't it? I'm quite excited seeing the space at the moment. There's a lot of there's just a lot of growth and fun and buzz and energy in the game right now. Like there has been a bit more of a pipe up from some regulatory bodies, which is, fair enough and justified, but it's just it's fun. It's a good time to be around it. I'm just loving the energy, mate. Like it's been really just crazy. Like the pace and just, I guess the only word for it is just the energy in the air right now. It's almost electric. Like when you visit stores, when I ring a retailer, when I'm interstate driving, every store I'm visiting is just, they're all just crushing it, and it's awesome to see. Like there's just a buzz around the industry right now. There's new products. There's people who weren't in the gym pre-COVID who have gone in since and taken more interest in their health. There's fitness junkies from before who are so keen to get back into it. They've just run at it. It's amazing what it's done. I mean, there's murmurs right now, and obviously it's all unconfirmed rumors. But obviously there's talks of COVID rearing its ugly head again. But I think for this point in time, it's probably the funnest and most exciting time in the sup industry I've seen since I've been in the game.
100%. It's a totally different vibe to what I've seen in the past 5 or 6 years anyway. It is a really positive vibe. Everyone seems to be optimistic for the future. I think it's almost like we came out of the eye of the storm. We came out of this storm, this COVID and this horrible time. And we kind of have all of this attitude now, hey, if we got through that, we can get through anything now. So it's only up from here, really. And everyone's excited about that. It's like, what's not to be excited about? We came out of this COVID thing. All right, even if this COVID, like you said, even if it rears its ugly head again and we go into some shape or form of, gym closures or whatever it might be, I think we're all more prepared for it now. We all know that we can get through it. We all know that if we dig our heels in and buckle down, we can make it out because we've proven it to ourselves. We've done it before. And there's just this optimism out there in the industry that hasn't been around for a long time. And I think the other thing is people are, and thank goodness for this, people are finally starting to get the message that the science is on the side of the supplements. All right. You're not coming across as highly intelligent or as some sort of, a revolutionary by saying, oh, don't take supplements, supplements do nothing. I get all my nutrients from all the fruit I eat. Like, that's fine. Get the majority of your macronutrients and your micronutrients from your food. But the science is on the side of the supplements as far as, can it help you with your performance? Yes. Can it help you with your general health? Yes. Can it help you get a better pump in the gym? Sure. Can it help you with your gut health? Yes. We've got the data to show it, and people are finally starting to get away from these, crazy loopy kind of ideas that supplements are the enemy and they're these synthetic compounds that are created in a lab and you should stay away from them if you're an earth child. And people are finally starting to go, all right, these things are cool. And the science backs them. They really, really work.
They do. It's exciting now, mate. And it's cool because the customers leveled up with us. It's in this really great time now. And I was talking about this. I was in Orange 2 days ago doing a seminar, and there's the retailer out there actually made the remark now. His customers have gotten to a point where they really, he's built his rep on sort of bringing in stuff much like your store, where it's all unless it all the panel adds up, he's not going to range it. And it means the customers have started researching, like, oh, what's this all about? And they've got into it, and they've almost become like supplement snobs now, he said. And he said, they'll look at the back of a panel and see 4 grams of citrulline malate instead of 6 or 8, and they're like turning their nose at it. And it's cool because it's allowed us as the retailer, because if you look at other markets, there's a definite ceiling on what the consumer is willing to pay and willing to look at for a product. And it's all price point based. Here in Oz, we're indulged in that we're allowed to go as crazy as we want on a formula if the quality's there and the ingredients are there and the felt effects are there. the consumer will pay it, and it's amazing. Whereas in the US, say where the average unit, even after conversion for a pre, might be $20 less than what we have here. So to manufacture that and wholesale it isn't commercially viable with the standard that we can have here in Oz. We're so spoiled supplement wise here because we just have a market that appreciates quality now, and they're more educated. Like imagine 5 years ago in your store, Stu, talking about cortisol with someone, talking about hormonal imbalances, talking about like dosages of amino acids in their pre-workouts.
Don't worry, I tried to, but it was. You'd say I'd spend half an hour talking about that stuff, and then the person would look at me like this and go, "So do you have C4 or not?"
Here's your tub, sir. Lemonade. Oh shit, man! But that's cool. That's good, isn't it? It's fucking awesome, man. I'm loving where we're at right now. Good energy, good vibe, good buzz, and I'm glad that we keep these. I guess this podcast has become more listened to than I expected, and I guess we almost want to apologise to the people who are our regular listeners because but it's for good reason, just have you all know. It's because there's so much hype and buzz and fun in the industry. We're all going crazy out balls to the wall, having fun in this game. And that's the reason we haven't had a chance to jump in front of the camera for a while. So to all our listeners, thanks for being patient with us. We hope you're having as much fun as we are.
Yeah, that's it. And just remember, guys, we haven't been sitting on our hands. We've got some really exciting guests lined up. We've got... what did Matty say we've got lined up coming up for next week?
It should be James, the owner of MyBlocks, should be behind that. So he's the guy who thinks up every part of that brand. MyBlocks is a massive brand that grew from a small company down in Cali, I think it was, so down in Southern California in the US, and became quite a monstrous brand actually, from what I hear, speaking in multiple countries, and they tend to they've come to Australia through Matt actually and his affiliates, and we're going to talk to the guy behind it, and they think up really weird and wonderful formulas, like so different to other stuff. Like the guy behind it is very, very creative. It's pre's that we really hadn't seen things like before.
Well, he was really like one of the first big commercial brands to successfully bring nootropics to the market. So that's going to be awesome. We have some other names coming up. I didn't want to be the one to mention them because I didn't know if we were allowed or if it was still under wraps. So I thought I'd throw that onto Will and see if he would.
I think they're still under wraps.
No, we got it. Yeah, it's under wraps for now. There's some really exciting ones coming up. So you'll have to just wait and see for those. But I think on that note, positivity in the industry. There's plenty of optimism. We might wrap it up now and say goodbye, listeners. Thanks for sticking with us. And sorry we haven't got as much content out there lately as we'd like.
Beautiful. What a positive note to end on, Stu. Let's call it an episode. We look forward to episode 15 up next with James. So thanks for listening again. See you guys.